I never had problems with war games growing up, especially before I really considered myself a Christian and really committed my life to Christ. Growing up, I played a lot of FPS. Call of Duty games isn't my favorite. I mention it a little bit later. Halo is kind of more my strong suit. But now that I'm much older and I have taken my walk with Christ much more serious, the idea of war, even outside of just video games, has been a troubling subject for me. And while it's easy to tiptoe around this subject and not prod at it and see where I actually sit with this subject, this game, playing Valkyria Chronicles 4 and actually beating it after 4 years, it has forced me to do some prodding at this subject. What made me very fascinated into the game Valkyria Chronicles 4 is, well, growing up, while I did say I did enjoy war games, including FPS, the game genre that I kind of swayed to more wasn't FPS, but instead was RPGs, and outside of that was turn-based tactical games. The most common and most known is Fire Emblem. So most of the setting is normally medieval, and as many know on my channel, I usually play games that have that medieval fantasy style. Partially because it is so mixed with imagination and fantasy and of the what if, so far between of what we live in today that culturally it can be very, well, set apart. But don't get me wrong, I'm not totally against games that are taking place in this present time. I'm all for it. It's very enjoyable also what you can play off with that. And even when just going back to the turn-based tactical games, I do know games like Advance Wars, which is the more military-esque present time setting of a turn-based tactical game setting. But again, when I saw Valkyria Chronicles 4, when I saw it coming out on the Switch, this was the first time I ever heard of this franchise. And one, getting more turn-based tactical games of other franchises that I haven't met is always a good thing in my book. And two, well, seeing the unique style that this game has compared to other turn-based tactical games was fascinating and made me pick up this game no matter what. It also helped that it looked like it was going to be heavily influenced by an anime-esque style also, which is, again, something I also really enjoyed. So, with all that combined, I was lured into the trap of Valkyria Chronicles 4. Hello, I am Noah Price, your Christian gamer, a Christian who loves RPGs and JRPGs and loves going on these journeys of playing these games, and throughout it, seeing how we can grow, whether just learning more about different philosophies or stories or journeys, or even being able to look at ourselves as Christians and bouncing off of it, of how can this improve ourselves, or actually, is this kind of bad? Should we watch out? Some of you might be wondering, what is Valkyria Chronicles 4? Well, that's a good question. As I kind of have tiptoed around, it's kind of a turn-based tactical game. But specifically, this fourth game is a technically spin-off from the actual franchise of Valkyria Chronicles. For many who do know this series, we're happy for this fourth installment because it turns out to be a spin-off specifically going off from the very first game. Supposedly, the very last game in the entry kind of steered away from what everybody loved of this series so far, and so hearing that this game was kind of going back to its roots made me excited for somebody who's never played any entries in this franchise. And that's another part, because it is a spin-off, you could just jump in without any recollection of the other stories. Basically all that's happening is, in the very first game, it's a representation of World War II, basically, but anime. Of course, everything's all fictional, but it is kind of using that as a basing. In this game, Valkyria Chronicles 4 is taking place during the same place, but somewhere else. That's basically all you have to know. Now, this whole segment of setting being in basically World War II, I wasn't aware of until I actually started playing the game, and then I was like, oh, Europa. Yeah, that's Europe. Okay, this is what we're doing. Which is very interesting already, because World War II is a kind of a touchy subject to many people. That war has afflicted, well, the world. It's interesting to see a studio actually make a game based on it. Now, talking about what this game actually is, it's a typical tactical turn-based game. The only thing that separates itself from what you would know from a Fire Emblem game is Fire Emblem games are known for being on a grid-based system. So every square you have is where you can move to. This game is different, is when you pick a character and control them, you have a free reign motion of them, which is very freeing and different and well, it gives a little extra way of immersion, I would say. But what they both share is the still same setup of we got a lot of story anime cutscenes of talking and talking and talking, and then you move on into a set map. Every single map has a little motive of you have to fulfill this accomplishment. And most turn-based tactical games, it's usually defeat all the enemies. This game has a lot of variety, which we'll talk about a little bit more because it's a huge positive. But yeah, you'll go from map to map and you'll have conversations about the main story as you go along. Now, what's so different from this game from even more tactical RPG games is the character selection. While this actually seems to be more than what you would normally get, which kind of makes sense because it is more of a army-based game, having a lot of soldiers at your deployment does make sense. But what you do lose in the consequence is less interaction from soldiers from each other. That usually was a common thing that you would find in other tactical turn-based games. Specifically, I'm more thinking of Fire Emblem for sure. That's usually the golden standard I'm going to be using for comparison here, to be honest. But the interactions they do give is sometimes more lucrative and more sweetened with honey compared to, well, some Fire Emblem interactions at all. Another difference you have is the actual classes that you have for each, well, soldier. The classes you have include, well, assault, scout, engineer, snipers, lancers, aka bazooka guys or girls, and not only that, but also tanks. Yes, I did forget grenadiers. They're like a hit and miss for me, to be honest, but it's whatever. It's whatever. But tanks, you literally get to control a tank, which I totally did not use a lot during my matches. Let's talk a little bit more about the matches that actually happen when you're in the map and how it controls, because it does also control different from normal, well, Fire Emblem games. Normal traditional Fire Emblem games, when you're actually doing a match, every character has one movement per turn, unless you obviously have like some kind of dancer who lets you reuse a unit's turn. But for the most part, everybody moves and that's it. Valkyria Chronicles 4 is unique in that it actually has badges, and you use a badge to actually move a unit, which means you can use one unit, aka a tank, multiple turns. Now, the consequence for this is that they will get tired and they have an AP bar to move them, and every single time it gets shortened and shortened and shortened, which makes sense. You're getting a little bit tired, a little bit fatigued. But beyond that, you can just, well, basically use a few units and not have to move everybody. Again, with this companioned with the actual free-flowing movement that you get while actually controlling the units is crazy. It gives so much freedom to the user or the player when playing the game. There is some problems with it though, because it does feel like sometimes you can easily just wreck yourself, especially since these strategic games are known for being very hard, which Valkyria Chronicles 4 definitely fulfills, which one I'm very glad for. Very glad for. It's the reason why I actually got into this genre in the first place. It was all because I heard the whisperings of Fire Emblem's hard difficulty. And well, it acquired me, and that's what I always enjoyed of the series going forward, and games like it. So again, yes, I'm excited that this game was hard, but those aspects of, well, moving, I could barely mess up my AP of usage and not be so using it to the max, and instead just wasting movement speed, and it just instantly makes it so that I'm barely out of reach of attacking an opponent, hurts so much as a strategic person. But if that's what you have to have in order to have this free-flowingness, it's worth it. What this game does in its unique style, oh, I love it so much. What it does for a player, it makes you feel not so forced to be only playing a certain way in order to win a map. You get to have more control and more creativity with it. This is also helped with something I already mentioned before, but typically, again, comparing to Fire Emblem, because again, it's my standard rule as what I know best, and that has to do with, well, the win condition. Majority of times what you'll get is the comment, oh, just kill all the units, all the enemy, and that's it. Rout the enemy. That's usually it. And some people have complained with Fire Emblem games in the past that sometimes there's too many maps like that and there's not enough variety. This game is different. Valkyria Chronicles 4 definitely always has varieties in its match, whether it's just its win con or even, well, one aspect is they are always throwing new mechanics or new things, new effects in the map. which I greatly enjoyed. Even to the point of the very last match, like all the way up, all the way through the game, they kept on throwing different effects, different equipment. While it doesn't always carry through other matches, it still was enough to keep you on your toes and keep everything still spiced up. Now this is a little bit weird. I kind of hurt my back a while ago, so sitting like this does kind of hurt. So let's actually continue with some of the problems I actually have with war games and stuff like that. That whole discussion, let's talk a little bit more about that outside. Let's go do that. Well, maybe we should change. Perfect. Let's go. Two side notes as we start this. One, this is the first time I'm ever doing this. Probably forever. I'm never going to do this again. I probably will. Second thing is, it's a little bonus, a little nugget of truth I found out in my life. I guess just right now. And that has to do with pain. So here's the thing about pain. It's hard to say. I almost want to say it's not bad. Well, it technically is bad. Pain is. The thing about pain is, though, I think it's very important to have in your life, at least in our point in time right now in our lives as Christians, basically. The fact is, well, ever since sin came in the world, that's where pain came in. And so through that, I think pain is one thing we can always look to as, hey, one day this pain will be gone. All pain will be gone forever with the second coming. And understanding and acknowledging that pain, at the very least, can be a sign of, hey, this is the brokenness and the sinfulness of this world, and it can keep us humbled and a reminder of that reality that we live in daily right now. So that's my little acknowledgement of pain, since I'm in pain walking through here. Also, third bonus thing, ducks. There are ducks. Many, many ducks. Am I going to scare the ducks? Maybe. 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 Is this what you thought you were going to get into when you clicked on this video? Probably not. We're getting ever so closely to this duck. These ducklets? Ducklets. Okay. Goodbye, ducks. War games are an interesting topic nowadays, at least for me. They are. Growing up, I have grown up with FPS, so first-person shooter games. They're most common for this. So the most one that comes to mind instantly is Call of Duty. I grew up with Call of Duty. I played that. I also preferred Halo much more, and I still do today. And it's partially due to this reasoning of, well, the problem with war games is they always seem to glorify war, if that makes sense. See, it wasn't until a little while ago, before World War, the very first one, the idea of war and going into battle had a different perspective altogether. Well, yes, people understood that, yes, war is brutal and it's really cruel and awful. There's still that perspective of honor and chivalry a part of it in a big way. More positive than negative, I would say. Now, I'm not saying that there's no honor for those who are in the military nowadays, serving and taking part in that. There's still honor. It's just there's a very much a different perspective when it comes to specific war. And not to say Call of Duty games and other more major war games specifically, sometimes they either glorify war. All right, seat, clean you off. Perfect. I do want to make it clear that I have the utmost respect for those who do serve in the military. While me as a Christian, I've already mentioned, I struggle with this idea of being a part of the military, mostly because of the fact that killing. Yeah, I struggle with the idea of killing a living human being as a Christian, even if it is out of self-protection or even protection of others. It's an idea that I don't know where I stand on, or at the very least, when I look at myself and see where I stand in it, I'm more on the passive side of things, which is kind of a perspective that most people have of Christians anyways, of being a pacifist. And wow, when you actually look at the Bible, That's not there. There's wars, there's countless wars of God's people fighting and God sending them out to fight. And so it's a weird perspective of, well, what is it? Is it actually okay or not? Or is it actually evil? I don't think it's evil. But yes, with finally actually taking on this game and actually playing through it again, I was confronted with this situation, or this idea, this philosophy question of how do I feel about war and what all does it have inside? Is it just evil? Is it just bad? Should I have nothing to touch about it? Or should I be actually grateful for those who served? Well, let's talk a little bit more about it. When I got this game in the first place, Valkyria Chronicles 4, I was very excited because I've never played this genre before, as I mentioned earlier. And just the idea of this kind of setting and this perspective and different style, I was just excited to take its steps into. Not even questioning the possibilities of me having to struggle with the idea of war. And obviously this is partially because I did bring in some bias when I came in to start playing this game. Now, it wasn't biased towards, well, war games are just like Call of Duty games, so they must be glorifying. No, it's not that. It's actually the other perspective of, well, I've played other kind of tactical games, such as Fire Emblem, and I have touched a little bit of the game that's similar to Advance Wars. And so I kind of have that little backdrop of, well, those games I found not too much of a problem, at least for me as a Christian. And so yes, I did have this bias towards playing this game. I was optimistic and I was excited to play this game, but I honestly had no idea what I was getting myself into. Alongside my biases, I expected a good, rich story, included with a lot of characters and their development together. And what I found was there. It was actually there. While it did ebb and flow of similarities between Fire Emblem games to, say, this game, such things as some of the characters technically didn't get as much attention as I was expecting. But on the other side, the main cast, or the main three crew members, the small little group, Cleo, or I guess the main characters, that's what they are. The main characters compared to the side characters, which do include, well, some of your army recruitments, some of them, they get a lot more attention, but I'm very happy that all of them got love. Sometimes in games, you'll see sometimes only the main character, the main protagonist, is the only one who gets love and actually gets to see the journey of development, while his main motley crew or even the other main characters don't. Now, where there wasn't so much similarities between Fire Emblem and these games is, well, in Fire Emblem you can have your characters grow together through support stuff, and that thing I loved with that game. Now here it is present with its own little squad stories, and so a select few of your characters do get development, but it's a little bit more quirky with how it's done, and it doesn't meet my standard of spoiledness with the Fire Emblem games, to be honest. But the main themes of this game being of duty, sacrifice, and ultimately just protection and serving is what I found in this game, which really I'm happy for. Sorry about that, by the way. I'm greatly happy about this because this is what took place over the glorification of war. War was not glorified. While this game does resemble World War II, but anime, it doesn't glorify it too much. It shows the actual sadness and cruelty and bleakness sometimes of, well, that situation in real life. And specifically on duty, the side of that is doing the right thing and actually taking up responsibility. And this just coincides with the ending of this game's story and how it surprisingly hit me really hard. While I've played countless of war games, specifically it has been more medieval fantasy style games, the ending of this game's story and just the progress, especially towards the later half of this game, just hit me so hard with some of the moves that this game actually decides to make, especially to the point of why they are fighting the war. Are they to get revenge, or do they win, or to, well, just to stop the war? Why are you fighting in the war? Is it to win, or is it just to stop war and get peace ultimately? Again, some of these topics are missed when you're actually dealing with games, I mean Call of Duty, sadly enough. just because it does end up being more side on the multiplayer. Let's play that and see how it isn't all about that killing side of things. And while some might say that's a, well, disjustice to Call of Duty, maybe it is. Maybe I'll have to deep dive into those games once more, but for me, that's personally what I found when playing through, well, this game. Now, I gotta curtain things up before my camera dies. So, I want to talk about some of the things I really liked before wrapping things up. And we'll talk about a little bit more about the things I disliked back at the studio. So I have to be honest, the way that this game told its story was actually really enjoyable. I loved how just the aesthetic of the whole booklet of the main character Claude and him writing it out as a journal. I really loved that, just that perspective in general, and not only that, how they could have put so much charm into this game through it. Just all the aesthetics in general really coincide with each other and just work so beautiful. Chef's kiss. Chef kiss. Well, I'm already going to spoil one of the things I kind of disliked about it, and it coincides with this, and it's the idea that, well, because you have this scrapbook type perspective and you're going through the story, it kind of, for some reason, they picked a weird choice, I believe, especially coming from Fire Emblem and being used to that. So with Fire Emblem, how they actually do it is when in between battles and all that, they have a story. So all the characters are talking and it goes through it until the next battle. Now, the problem with this is in here, because there's a scrapbook and every different story event is split up individually, they're all segmented. That means it stops in between every single story event, which I think it's kind of silly and just a waste of time. What I thought they should have done is just go all the way through, and then you can go back at a specific moment backwards. I think that would have worked much better. Well, my camera's about to die, so let's instant transmission back to my studio. Let's do it. Don't know if you get that. Gunshots, gunshots. Instant transmission. Ah! Okay. Let's go change. Alright. Okay. Whew, much better. Again, sorry for the shakiness and all the craziness in that shot thing. Again, trying something new. You know, you're going to get weird stuff. I hope you enjoyed it. I kind of enjoyed it. But whatever. There's a lot I've enjoyed about this game. Whether it's just its difficulty, whether it's actually how they took the genre style of the tactical turn-based game, which is normally, well, grid-based, and get rid of the grid-based part of it and actually just change it. I've also enjoyed obviously the aesthetic of this game. They did a lot of love into this game. And again, this is coming from somebody who's never played any game in the series. Just going in for the very first time, it's been greatly enjoyable. But why did it take me 4 years to beat? Sadly, it's not because, well, oh no, I have problems with war, there's something along the lines of that. No, actually, it's just because it was hard. Sometimes this happens to me where I played a game and then I get about halfway or so and I get wrecked by the game. Then I normally take a small break and I'll come back to it and just finish it. That's what happened to this game, it just was within years of parts. Again, bunch of other games coming out, got distracted, yada yada. This game is a really good game, and especially going back to finish this was even a greater experience. It was really worth it. Especially since I would say the last half of the game is much better than the first half. Not that the first half is bad, but the second half is for sure even better, just because they have a lot of payoffs and just takes that they make that really work. I will be honest, while playing through this game and while finding out that this game was a bit, well, based in World War II, I was a little bit worried of how it's gonna work with the old problem of it being anime-esque. Luckily, it didn't actually become a real problem again. Like, I'm really glad for that. That was a real worry. There's a few moments where it's like, okay, that's a problem, but also like, but the anime-esque stuff that they did add in, you know, I obviously enjoyed. For me, this was the whole aspect of putting in, well, magic. It's not magic, it's really science. The fantasy side of this game of being Rad Knight and using it as a idea of, well, it's science, but also kind of getting magic side of things with the Valkyrias. Valkyrias? I don't know why I pronounced that weird. Odd. But yeah, stuff like that was kind of cool to see a little bit of that element in there. And I assume that's where things got wrong with the last entry of Valkyria Revelations. So I assume they pushed too far on this end and kind of moved away too much from the reality of this game. And that is also, well, a aspect of this game that was really good is it feels more real and enriched, especially with the story they were trying to tell of, well, just the World War II experience of fighting and why are we fighting. The story they told there with its themes was much more richer than what could be probably told when you try and mix too much of this fantasy style into it. Not gonna lie, the villain of it was kind of meh, to be honest. Not gonna lie. But the journey within the game, I would say, is very much worth it. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, even though it's a bit of a weird one. Again, very weird. Very weird. But I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. Alright. Okay. Go watch more videos of mine. Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, God bless. Bye.